Good morning, friends. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Continuing on with our series, 2013 OBEJournal, I think it's number 9. And get right into it. And some more from Mr. Sculthorp, who we'd heard from a while back. His experiences are not talked about it much, but very relevant. And let's go to something called quarrelsome spirits. We're still kind of on the lower level here. I mentioned before that many of the lower states are inhabited by people with similar predominating thoughts or tendencies who gravitate to the same approximate wavelength and spirit. The main thought is very strong and noticeable when entering such a state. One of my most distasteful visits was to a town inhabited by those unfortunate people with quarrelsome habits. I was put down in a street and, as usual, sensed the quality of the place. It was dreadful, and as I looked around, invisible to them, I saw people violently quarrelling. As my awareness became more of the state, my spirit body received their thoughts. They were vicious, pitiless, and murderous. It was a hopeless place to be in, as each individual's nature was worsened by the collective thoughts of the whole. Yeah, this is what happens. I could not stand it and had said, "Take me away." My guide at once moved me, and we arrived at the outskirts of the town as a bare, gravelly place, and there I saw a collection of hutches for pets like mice and rabbits. Asking what these were for, I was told that these people who had no love for their fellow humans, but would sometimes be fond of a pet. They were encouraged to keep pets in the hope that some of the love would grow from it. This state is the negative of what existence should be. Consider the lot of the person whose life on earth had fitted him or her for this state or wavelength after passing over. What little love there is taken away, swamped by the mass thoughts of other people. Which reminds one of the question, "For he that hath, for him that shall be given. For him that hath not, from him shall be taken even that which he hath." Quite relevant when you think about it. Thought is easily received by the spirit body, and stronger than the thought, the more effective it is. When two sincere friends meet on a pleasant plane, each will radiate a thought of pleasure which will be received by the other. Each recipient's pleasure is therefore doubled, and the returning thought is consequently doubled. This multiplication of the original thought many times and at electrical speed gives some idea of the happiness of some planes. When one realized the application of the same law to the dreadful state I have described, where the thoughts of hatred are exchanged, the consequences can be imagined. Once, when projecting and becoming conscious, I found myself sitting down outside a small house. I could not sense any vibrations denoting the conditions and seemed insulated from them. Suddenly I was picked up and given a bandy chair, two crossing hands and making a seat for another. The situation made me laugh because I could hear my two helpers laughing, and I had my arms round their necks, but I could not see them. They ran me round the house and left me in front of it again. As I was wondering what it was all about, one of them, now visible, came out of the house. I asked him what place this was, and he said, "The land of low thoughts." He began to conduct me, and I saw what appeared to be a dreary, endless marsh. My insulation had apparently been removed, for the place seemed to smell like a town's sewage works. Here and there were sad-looking people, some slowly walking, some standing still. The vibrations of this place were wretched, and I realized why my spirit helpers had enlivened me by that bit of fun on my arrival. I was not keeping long I was not kept long, and I was, as usual, taken to a bright place before returning to the physical body. This was necessary, as my spirit body had been exposed to these low vibrations, which are liable to remain for a while, owing to its tape recording powers, which retain those conditions. Should I, on return, ponder over an experience on a low state, the same vibration can be felt with its bad influence, although to a lesser degree. There are many such places in the lower vibrations, and their description is depressing, but the facts should be known. I had projected, and when I became conscious, I found I was running in my tropical service uniform. Again, that's probably a World War One memory, although this was in the 1930s. The toughest part of my life's memories, and it was war service, and it had been chosen. The state seemed to be the lowest I had ever been taken to. The vibrations were mixed and very worrying. In my journey, I was penetrating deeper and deeper into this low state, and its appearance got gloomier with miserable-looking houses. Twice I was halted to enable me to note the inhabitants, who were viciously brawling amongst themselves. One man whom I knew on earth walked through me. His state and spirit did not surprise me, but I was glad I was now invisible. My pace became slower. I appeared to be nearing the lowest depths of the place, and no one was visible. I was halted in front of what appeared to be a grey-looking warehouse with a door. This opened, and I was made to go forward, but I was halted by the awful vibrations that met my body. Inside, I saw a number of individuals, perhaps 100, who were slowly walking about. Their clothing, which was nondescript, hung around them like festoons of dirty cobwebs, and their faces were dull grey. The inside of the place was also grey. There was no colour, and only a dim light penetrated from above. Wretched as the scene was, it was mild compared with what the vibrations I felt. Each entity was walking slowly with a bowed head, taking no observable notice of anything. All their thoughts had the same dreadful tenor: "We are here forever, there is no hope for us." This dreadful thought seemed to be true, and I could neither detect nor was I impressed with any redeeming feature. I seemed to have contacted history. 1,000 years would be their yesterday, and their tomorrow too, in eternity's boundless time. These vibrations were the lowest I'd ever contacted, and I was glad with my guide, who quickly withdrew me. These entities were all walking without any apparent notice of each other or in any direction. Some may understand when I say that they moved like negatively charged particles, each seeking to avoid the other. After many visits to the lower states, it became quite obvious that they are all a repetition of the many different ways in which ignorance during earth can place a person in his or her particular position in space. The earth life has formed a vibratory spirit body which must naturally gravitate to that vibration in spirit. There are no mistakes. The law is fair. Who can complain when one's own self is both judge and jury? There are no favourites or privileged ones, and those considered great on earth are not necessarily so afterwards. Always the motive of action counts. The many ways and different degrees by which some of our neighbours throughout history have made the lives of their fellow humans miserable are well known, and ranges from mental torture to extreme physical agony. We tend to blame these guilty ones, but more advanced spirits feel sorry for them. I was taken to a better state before returning to my physical body. The next morning I was in a hurry and bustle, opening parcels before opening my shop door, where I was suddenly, gently but firmly, compelled to sit on a chair. I experienced the most intense and deep state of sorrow for a loved one that it is possible to feel. I was so full of pity that I had the utmost difficulty in preventing the tears from flowing. The loved one was, guess what? The dictator head of a country. Regaining some composure, and feeling the gentle presence of a high spirit, I mentally asked, "Why have I to feel like this?" and was told, "You have been pinned to the place where he is going." This happened in 1937 when there was no actual threat of war. I need hardly say that this kind of emotion from a dictator is not normally my nature, and I was glad that my shop was not open. This enveloping soul was a spirit from a high sphere, whose love and deep pity for such a one on earth gave me cause to think a lot during the rest of the day. The great but gentle power that overcame me, although I was physically active at the time, surprised me, as I never had experienced it on earth before. The hopelessness of those I had contacted during the night was so ghastly and desolate that only spirit experience can know the extent of it. It cannot be described in words. I hope there is some turning point for these poor souls. Forever is a long time. There seems to be a certain simplicity in spiritual truths, and we go a long way round to find them. We are all a part of a whole, and everyone is wanted. The more mistakes that are made, the more concern there is for the one who makes them. The gentleness and concern for others by those who have reached the high spheres is, as I have tried to make clear, very deep, and there is a unselfishness and consideration for all that is simply and truly the reason for their elevation to the highest vibrations in the spirit realm. So, yeah. Negativity and compassion, hopelessness and hope, and stasis and trust in progress. All themes that we can ponder on. Our author does get to the higher spheres and gives some wonderful reports on that, which we will get to. But in terms of negativity sending to do a certain place, recently I was reading one of my favorite magazines, The New Yorker, and there was a story on an article on private limited cell phone networks that are closed off to others and are, covered in cryptic rearrangement of language that only the sender and the receiver can get. And Interpol or certain European police had figured out a way to break into these, and were listening for quite a long time, months, to conversations by conscious criminals, gangs that were involved in all sorts of smuggling, drugs, human trafficking activity, and didn't know they were being listened to. They had confidence in their encrypted network. A fascinating story, and they managed to bust a lot of people. And at a certain point in the article, there was a reference to the large shipping ports like Rotterdam and Antwerp in Europe, where there's millions of these large metal containers are shipped all the time, every day. Well, not every day, but every year. And it's relatively easy with a little bit of bribery and customs and longshoremen people to get things in and out, because there's so much and they can't examine everything. And so it's a hub of activity for sure. And in one case, later the police discovered a disused site, not in Rotterdam, but on the edge somewhere, where there were old containers and junk lying around. And they found that one gang had put one of those containers in there and had it all set up as a little torture lab with for those they wanted to punish in, rivals and whatnot, and with a dentist chair and drills and instruments of torture. And one of the last conversations of a certain criminal that they heard was when he had heard that this had been set up, and some people were there, imprisoned there, which there were. And he said on the phone, "Oh God, I can't wait to get over there and torture those sons of bitches." And it struck me that, yes, there are people that are that demented with vengeance and violence, and not just, well, it's a matter of doing business, we have to protect our yada, 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 would be sending themselves to such a state when they died, because they would be filled with those thoughts. The gruesomeness and the joyfulness in taking joy in that torture stuff. It's astonishing to all of us, who expect that, violence is a byproduct of the business activity, in which it is mostly, but then you look at how far down the ladder of consciousness they can get. Anyway, it made me think of Frederick Sculthorp's experience there. And it's been on the back of my mind to talk about it for a while. But a good point about the angelic type beings who would feel pity for someone so low, or someone's so low. Is ultimate pity and compassion reserved for the angelic? Well, there's another question. All of us feel a regular amount of it, that's for sure. But could we be with people that low? I know in earlier episodes I've talked about wandering through some of those towns and people being, selfish and unfriendly. And I think it was one where I was expecting to see, guys spilling out of a bar fighting, and we didn't, but it's not uncommon. Just like in certain, neighborhoods in physical cities, you're going to see that sort of thing. Because people are primed for that kind of explosive resentment and anger. And they're just right on the edge. Well, we're right on the edge of traveling. And our loads have been lightened some time ago. If indeed we ever had a load that bad. And I'm certainly not immune to bursts of anger. In my younger years, even more so. And I recognized it as the state of a turbulent astral body that young people often have, where the emotions are not as well under control as they could be. And they burst into anger just as quickly as they burst into passion. And it's the bursting that is the keynote of the activity. As one grows, one's ability to smooth out those explosions into a more reserved serenity is what happens for most people. Some it doesn't, but for most of us that's what comes. Plus, those of us that have children have to learn to cope with the explosiveness in their astral bodies. And I've observed that, not being a father in this life, I have observed that many times in others. And it's a common enough perception. I don't pretend it to be original or exciting in any way. I'm sure many of you recognize what I'm saying. But projection. Didn't I have an idea about where we were going to go, or were we going to improvise? That is the keynote of what we're doing here. And I should add that recently discovered in one of my Facebook groups someone who has, many people who can project and lucid dream and have interesting experiences and do retrievals, all sorts of things. One poster mentioned having done retrievals many times, not having been to the Monroe Institute, of course, and learning one of the courses there, the Lifeline, but in recent years just was doing retrievals every time she meditated. And I thought that was interesting. And some of those retrievals were complex affairs. And retrievals can be that way in terms of having to convince somebody that they're, not physically functioning anymore, even though they feel very vibrant and alive. That can be the biggest challenge. Okay, I'm now at the site of a crash that I had read about some days ago here in Canada, where a small bus, I believe, I'm not sure entirely of the details, collided with a truck on a rural highway, and about 15 people passed. Now, I know there's been others. The next day, I think there was one in India. Such is the news. There seem to be bus crashes all the time. And I find myself at the site of a bus crash, and probably taken there because I've been told that some of the dead folk have been, as we say, retrieved, but some have not after a few days. It's always, it's a few days at our time. It's not necessarily a few days in their time. I'm seeing I think 3 people, 2 men and a woman, who have, in shock, recreated the thought form of the bus before the crash and are sitting in it wondering why they're not going anywhere. I've had this experience before, once with a gas station in suburban Toronto where a gas tank exploded like instantly, and I think 3 people died, and I found them sitting around. One of the reactions, also, I think that that plane that in Holland that was going to, I think, Indonesia or somewhere, that was shot down by the Russians, of course, or the Ukrainians. They shot it down with a gun they didn't really know how to use, and everyone died. And I projected there and found a man who had automatically, I'm sure there was others in the situation, but I found a man who was still looking at his laptop in his seat and had automatically, they seem to automatically do it. Some people recreate in a second the thought form of the vehicle they're traveling in. And he was still looking at his computer, and it took some convincing, because they don't feel like they're dead. So anyway, we're still standing by these people in the bus. They're sitting down calmly, enjoying their journey to somewhere, and have not come to consciousness that the bus is destroyed and, I believe, caught fire. They were, killed quickly and made a transition, and the transition was to a thought form of the bus that was intact. They've been sitting there for a while and seem a little puzzled, and I asked them how they were, and one guy looked up and said, "I'm getting a little bored. What happened to the driver? How come we're not going anywhere? Did he stop and have to go to the washroom?" I think, yeah. And I'm saying, no, the bus is here, but everyone else has gone. It's broken down. I think maybe you should come with me, and we'll go get another bus. And he turns and looks at the fellow next to him and said, "What do you think?" So it sounds a little odd to me. Go get another bus. Did you know the bus had broken down? Yeah, the guy shook his head. And I think there's a woman behind him who was asleep when it happened and still seems to be asleep now, or resting or something. And we talk a little more, and they're puzzled over my sudden appearance, and I guess hadn't seen any other spirit guides or helpers, as we call ourselves. And don't know if they can trust me. Well, he says, are you a representative of the bus company? And I said, no, I'm not officially a representative, but I got a call and to come and see you. There's no bus company people here right now, but I was informed that the bus had broken down and, other people had already gotten off, and I've just come and I found you three. And we can quickly get to another bus that's been provided. And they said, well, okay. And I said, why don't you get your stuff together, and we'll just go over the buses just around over the ways a piece. And they look at each other and decide maybe it's a good idea, and because it's obvious they're not going anywhere, and the bus is quiet, and they're not quite sure why. And so they get up and gather their things, got some small bags. It's not like a journey where they're going out of country. They were going someplace for the day, so they had a few little things they were taking along with them. And someone has a flask of maybe coffee. Someone else has a bag with a sandwich in it or something, And I nod to do you know the woman behind here? And they said, well, not really. I said, but can you wake her up? And the one guy goes, oh, all right. And he goes and gets up and shakes her arm at the shoulder. And she wakes out of her snooze and looks at him rather, a little silly, a little dopey. And he said, we have to change buses, dear. And I think he knows her name, but doesn't know her well. They might have all come from the same group home or facility of some kind. I'm not sure. They seem like, they're seniors for sure. And she looked surprised and said, well, okay then. And, kind of shakes herself awake and gets up. And in a moment or two goes by in this speeded up time that we can experience here as we do the retrieval. And I said, okay, then come on then. And we get off the bus slowly. And I know there's another bus out there that's been manifested for them. And I said, oh, come on over here. Here's the other bus. And we walk over. It's not far, a few yards. And there's a younger fellow who I bet, is he young? There's a fellow driving the bus. And he says, hi there, how you doing? Sorry to keep you waiting. And does the perfectly polite and sort of efficient looking bus driver, well dressed and clear eyed, and looks like he knows where he's going and what he's doing. And I look at him and he nods at me, and I say, come on, here's the bus, and they'll take you very quickly to your destination. The driver's here, and others have been taken already, so they get on the bus and sit down. It's a small one, might hold about 30 people. And I say, okay then, we'll see you later. And the guy nods at me, closes the door, and the bus drives off. And this is a spirit bus, and this will go to an appropriate place to let off these people. A reception center that will be set up perfectly well with all the amenities that the senior citizens would like to have up here. And I can see them sitting down in a pleasant garden patio and being served tea and sandwiches. I'm not there, but I can see it. And my part in this is over, and I hope it is indicative to you of the sort of thing that can go on. Now, other retrievals can be much more complicated and take ages, but that one was nicely done, Gordon. That was good. No muss, no fuss. And there we go. That is one of the things that can be done in projection. And if it happens to you, just go with the flow. Use your intuition. You know what to do. You've done them before, just not consciously. That's what I found when I started, when I was following the experiences, instructions in Bruce Moen's 4 books. He would, these things would happen, and you'd do a trip using hemisync tapes, and you'd do a retrieval. You'd figure out how to do it. And I seemed to find them quite easy. And I thought after a while, how come I'm finding this so easy? Have I done it before? I thought, yes, I must have. And my conclusion was I'd done them before unconsciously, and the practice of using the hemisync tapes and following instructions made it conscious. I'm now at an ice cream parlour on one of the reception levels, set up for recently deceased children. And they're sometimes brought here after any number of accidents anywhere, ferries sinking, buses crashing, the whole 9 yards of sudden death on the highway. And sometimes it's the children that get taken and not the parents. The parents get injured, yada, yada, yada. And, people get thrown out of vehicles, bang their heads, yada. So, this is a beautiful, happy place, an ice cream parlour, quite large, with just everything that you might think. I'm a bit like one of those fast food places that have a play area in the corner with rubber toys and, a bouncy, spongy thing. Kids bouncing up and down, screaming their heads off. That's there in one corner. And others are having fancy-looking ice creams and in plates with, fruit and, sprinkles and, marshmallows, no doubt. And other sort of other ingredients that children love. And there are some helpers in the background that have brought them there, but they're allowing the kids to be, run around and play and have fun. It reminds me of kindergarten teachers at recess that stand in the corner in the play yard and watch and only intervene when there's a little spot of bother, fighting over a toy or something, which, as a bus driver waiting to take children home from school, I saw a few times. And quite a delightful sort of chaotic interaction. I would watch that, these 4-year-olds spinning around playing with toys and making up games and, interacting in funny ways or not interacting, staring at the fence, looking at a tree, laughing at squirrels, And it gave me a whole new definition of chaos and order. I thought people would think this is chaos, but it's not. It's perfectly ordered and harmonious. Anyway, we're coming to the end of our time, and I leave you with that pleasant vision of recently deceased children having fun in an astral plane ice cream parlour. They won't live there forever, but they'll have a hell of a good time till they get tired and want to fall asleep, and then they'll be taken somewhere to be looked after. Sort of high-class group home orphanage places, of which there are many on the astral plane. Bye now.